I'm Kyra Tyler. I grew up in a town where the word service always came with a uniform and a salute. My dad was a decorated Army sergeant, and my older brother, Logan, made it into Special Forces before he turned 22. Around here, combat boots were as common as church shoes, and toughness was something you proved, not talked about. But I never really fit that mold. While Logan was outside flipping tires and timing his runs, I was at the kitchen table mapping escape routes on old atlases or solving logic puzzles I found online. I could name every river in Southeast Asia and recite the elevation profiles of mountains most people couldn't even pronounce. At family dinners, when conversations turned to field exercises and weapons drills, I'd go quiet and let the sound of forks scrape over silence. My father never said I was weak. He didn't need to. Every compliment he gave Logan, every proud nod during a story about real grit, was a quiet reminder that I wasn't cut from the same cloth. He called Logan a natural soldier. Me? He once said I'd probably make a good librarian at a military academy. I laughed along with him, but the truth settled somewhere deep and stayed. From a young age, I knew I wasn't built like them. I wasn't fast, and I hated yelling. I preferred quiet to chaos and thinking things through instead of reacting. It wasn't that I didn't want to serve. I just saw service differently. I didn't want to charge in with a rifle. I wanted to be the one who figured out how to get the team home safely before the bullets ever flew. But in a house where push-ups mattered more than problem solving, that kind of thinking didn't earn you much. On birthdays, Logan got survival knives and tactical watches. I got books from Mom, usually with titles like The Art of Strategy or Critical Thinking in Modern Warfare. Dad barely glanced at the covers. He'd nod once, then go back to talking about field rations and cold weather training. Still, I never let it turn into bitterness. I just kept my head down and kept learning. I knew there was value in what I could do. I just didn't know if anyone else would ever see it. And the more I tried to prove I belonged, the more invisible I seemed to become. Sometimes, I'd wonder if strength always had to be loud. If it had to look like bruised knuckles and shaved heads. Or maybe, just maybe, it could look like precision. Like being the only one who saw what others missed. But back then, all I had was the hope that someday, I'd get the chance to prove that quiet didn't mean weak. It meant prepared. It was a Sunday. One of those lazy, slow Georgia evenings where the air was heavy with the smell of pot roast and cornbread. My mom set the table like she always did, with cloth napkins, even though we'd tear through dinner like a storm anyway. Logan had driven in for the weekend, still wearing his tactical boots under the table like it was part of his skin. My dad was in his element, talking about rifle upgrades and new squad drills like he never left active duty. I sat there quietly, as usual, letting their words bounce off me while I passed the sweet tea and tried to keep my breathing steady. My mom asked about a recipe. My dad made a joke about how real food came in MREs. Logan laughed, like it was the first time he heard it. No one looked at me. I waited until they were halfway through their second plates. Timing matters. I told myself that over and over. So when I finally said, I joined the Army, it was like I had cracked the silence in half. At first, no one said anything. Then Logan snorted. He leaned back and looked at me like I'd said I was moving to Mars. For what? The family newsletter, he said, chuckling. I didn't answer. I added calmly, Intelligence branch. Strategic analysis. I ship out next month. That's when Dad laughed. Not the warm kind, the kind that stings. You won't last a week, he said, not even looking up from his plate. Just like that. Like I'd told them, I was switching toothpaste brands, not signing up for something that might define the rest of my life. My hands were under the table, clenched into fists I didn't even realize I'd made. I looked at my mom, hoping, maybe, she'd say something. Anything. She didn't smile. She didn't soften her voice like she usually did. She looked me dead in the eye and said, Strength doesn't always need volume. That's all. But it landed, like an anchor in my chest, holding me steady while everything else around me spun. The rest of dinner blurred. My dad went back to talking about Logan's last field exercise. Logan made a joke about a guy in his squad throwing up after a 5-mile run. My mom cleared the plates in silence. I helped her, even though my arms felt like they weighed more than my body. No one mentioned what I said again. Like it hadn't mattered. Like I hadn't just laid myself open in front of them. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling fan. I'd already applied, already passed the tests, already filled out the paperwork. I didn't tell them before because, in some small, dumb way, I still wanted them to say they were proud. Or at least that they believed I could do it. What I got instead was silence. And that silence hurt more than any drill sergeant ever could. People think rejection is loud. They think it comes in slamming doors and screaming matches. But the worst kind is the kind that looks like indifference. That's what I got. Not anger, not disappointment, just dismissal. That's what became my fuel. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove something to myself. That I didn't need Logan's muscles or my dad's medals. I just needed my own strength. The kind they never saw. The kind that didn't wear boots for show or bark orders in front of a crowd. The kind that notices patterns others miss. The kind that survives in silence and gets the job done when the shouting's over. I didn't cry that night. I didn't write some angry journal entry or punch a pillow. I sat there and let it settle. Let the sting become steel. Because I knew from that moment on, I wasn't just going to serve. I was going to be the reason people came home. Basic training didn't scare me. It wasn't the shouting or the push-ups or even the 4 a.m. wake-ups. What hit hardest was how fast people decided who you were, just by how loud you talked or how fast you ran. From the moment I stepped off the bus, I could feel it. No one said it out loud, but they looked at me like I didn't belong. I wasn't built like them. I didn't shout during drills or brag about my pull-up count. I kept to myself, kept my head down, and started observing. Everyone else was trying to stand out. I was just trying to understand how the system worked. What made people fail? What got them yelled at? What they missed when the pace got too fast? At night, when the lights went out, I pulled out a small notebook and wrote, I logged mistakes. Mine. Theirs. The instructors. I made notes on how to tighten laces faster, where to stand to hear commands clearly, and which sergeant had a pattern to his inspections. I didn't do it to be better than anyone. I did it so I wouldn't fall behind. It wasn't long before they noticed. Not what I was writing, just the fact that I was writing. One guy started calling me Clipboard Girl, even though I didn't have a clipboard. The nickname stuck. A quiet way of saying I was weird, that I didn't fit the mold. I let it happen. Sometimes it's better to let them believe you're not a threat. I wasn't the fastest in our group. I finished near the back on most runs. My weapon drills were shaky at first. My voice cracked the first few times I had to yell a call out. But I never missed a drill. I never showed up unprepared. And I never made the same mistake twice. That was my edge. Quiet consistency. The others would compare bruises or push-up scores. I'd be off to the side, watching, writing. They thought I was soft, but I saw every missed cue. I caught every command that got half heard in the wind. And slowly, I started to notice that I was making fewer mistakes than the people who laughed the loudest. It didn't make me popular, but I didn't come here for popularity. I came to prove something to myself. That my way quiet, patient, calculated could survive in a place built for noise and muscle, and maybe even make it better. They didn't see it yet, but I felt it starting to shift. The way some of them looked twice when I didn't get corrected. The way others leaned closer when I whispered a reminder before inspection. I was still Clipboard Girl, but the tone was starting to change. The mission looked simple on paper. Navigate uneven terrain, breach a target, then exfil before sunset. They handed us standard issue maps, worn and vague like someone had intentionally blurred the details. Most teams didn't question it. They followed the most obvious path, the one that snaked through the valley and looped toward the fake target zone. Ours started that way too. We were about 30 minutes in when something felt wrong. The map said we should be passing a dry creek bed, but the terrain didn't match. I'd studied this section 2 nights earlier, not because I had to, but because I couldn't sleep and needed something to quiet my mind. I'd found old satellite images online, compared them to the training map, and printed out a version with potential terrain shifts. Just in case, I slowed down and pulled out the folded paper from my vest. "Something's off," I said. A couple of guys rolled their eyes. "It's a training op," one of them muttered. "Nothing's ever exact," but I pointed to a slight rise in the ground and explained how the runoff patterns didn't match the map. I told them there was a better path east, marked on my version. The squad leader hesitated. "We go off plan. We mess up the timeline," he said. "We stay on this path. We risk walking straight into a bad call," I replied. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't emotional. I just laid it out like a fact. Like everything else, I'd been tracking for weeks. After a beat, he nodded. "Fine. We go east. But if this turns out to be nothing, you're buying the next round." We moved off course. The new path wasn't perfect, but it made more sense. No blind turns. No oddly sharp descents. It felt right. An hour later, just as we were breaking over a ridge, we heard the boom. It came from the direction we were supposed to go. Everyone froze. A voice came over the radio, confirming a simulated minefield had been triggered. Another team had walked straight into it. The exercise halted. Medics rushed in for evaluation. They were fine, but the mission was over for them. Back at base, instructors grilled us. How did we know to reroute? What intel did we have? I handed over my notes without fanfare. The lead instructor skimmed the pages, then looked up at me like he was seeing someone new. "You caught this from terrain drift and drainage mapping?" he asked. I nodded. No smile. No victory speech. Just the truth. That's when everything shifted. The teasing didn't stop overnight, but it changed. The tone softened. People started asking to borrow my notes. One guy stayed after lights out just to ask how I had learned to read elevation changes that subtly. I didn't gloat. I just explained. I showed him the markers I'd used and how to line up satellite data with real-world terrain. It felt different now. Like maybe my way of thinking wasn't just tolerated. Maybe it was useful. Maybe, in some quiet, undeniable way. I had just saved a group of people from a real-world mistake waiting to happen. And maybe, just maybe, the girl with the notebook was becoming the one they trusted when things got unpredictable. Later that night, I unfolded the same map on my bunk. Same lines, same notes, same quiet scribbles. But now it looked different. It looked like proof that in a world built for noise, being the one who pays attention might be the loudest thing you can do. After that training op, everything felt just a little different. People still called me clipboard girl, but now it came with a smirk, not a sneer. The same guys who used to joke about my notebooks started lingering after drills, pretending to stretch, waiting for a moment to ask, "Hey, do you still have that checklist for gear layout?" I didn't say much. I never really needed to. I just nodded and handed over the notes. One by one, they started copying my charts, memorizing my maps, even taping checklists inside their own lockers. No one made a big deal out of it. That's the thing about change in the military. It doesn't come with applause. It comes into eye contact that lasts a second longer, and questions that were never used to be asked. One evening, just before lights out, a guy I barely knew sat next to me on the bunk. He cleared his throat and asked, "How do you spot risk zones so fast?" I showed him. Slowly. Methodically. He didn't laugh once. He just listened. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. That's when it really hit me something had shifted. Not just around me, but in me. The name started as a joke from our squad leader. "You're the calm before chaos," he said during an after-action review. "The quiet one, who somehow sees the cracks before they break." It stuck, and for once, I didn't mind the nickname. It felt like the truth. I wasn't barking orders or leading formation runs. But people followed me in their own way. They watched how I moved, how I prepared. I became the one they came to when they felt uncertain but didn't want to admit it. My strength wasn't in how much weight I could lift. It was in the steadiness I brought when everything else felt like it might fall apart. And even though my voice still didn't carry across the field, my presence did. It was in a way that no one forgot extra batteries when I was around. In the way people double-checked coordinates before a drill, just because I had once mentioned a terrain shift, I didn't need a title or a rank to lead. I just had to show up the same way every day. Not loud, not flashy, just prepared. That was enough. The auditorium smelled like old uniforms and polished wood. Flags lined the stage, and veterans filled the seats beside fresh recruits and proud families. I sat near the front between my dad and Logan, both of them in full posture mode, laughing loud enough to be heard by the entire row behind us. My name was printed on the program, but no one in my family mentioned it. Dad introduced me to the man sitting behind us as the one who does admin work for Intel. He said it like I made photocopies. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because by now I had run out of ways to flinch. The ceremony moved slowly. Stories of sacrifice, service, and leadership. The kind of moments my dad lived for. And then they called my name. I stood and walked up to the podium, heart steady, mouth dry. I didn't bring notes, just a small breath and a decision to say only what mattered. I talked about silent service, about the kind of work that doesn't make the papers or show up in medals but still changes outcomes. I spoke slowly, watching the faces in the crowd shift from polite to curious. Then it happened. A voice from the back asked to speak. I looked up and instantly recognized the man. A Navy SEAL, clean-cut, eyes sharp. We'd never spoken directly, but I knew his name from mission logs. He stepped into the aisle and faced the room. 2 years ago, he began. My team was pinned down after a breach went sideways. The only reason we made it out was because of a contingency plan buried in a file. One line, handwritten, with coordinates and alternate evac points. She wrote that. If she hadn't seen what we didn't, I wouldn't be standing here. Then he turned to my father. You don't know who you raised. The room went still. Not heavy, not awkward, just quiet. Awake. The kind of quiet that feels like a held breath. People began to stand, one by one. Not clapping, just standing. A slow, silent ovation that said everything no one had ever told me. I looked at my dad. His mouth was slightly open, eyes locked on mine, searching for something to say. But nothing came out. Logan didn't make a joke. For once, he just looked at me and didn't look away. I finished the rest of my speech without shaking, without needing to prove anything, because the work had already spoken, loud enough that even my father finally heard it. Not in the way he expected, but in the way it mattered. I stepped off the stage, not as a daughter waiting for praise, but as a soldier who had already earned it. Quietly, thoroughly, and in front of everyone who once doubted me. After the ceremony, people gathered in small groups outside the auditorium. The air smelled like old cologne and fresh grass. I stood near the entrance, still holding the folded program in my hand, pretending to read the back like I didn't feel the weight of everything that had just happened. My father had wandered off, shaking hands, retreating into the kind of conversation he understood. I stayed still. Logan walked over quietly. For once, his boots didn't stomp like they owned the ground. He stood next to me without saying anything, just looked out at the flags still fluttering along the walkway. I waited, not expecting much, not expecting anything. He didn't look at me when he finally spoke. That was good, he said. Just 3 words. Simple, flat. But something in his voice cracked a little at the end. He shifted, like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. I glanced at him and saw his hands flex once, then settle at his sides. We stood in that silence for a few more seconds. The kind that didn't feel heavy anymore, just honest. He didn't say he was proud, didn't apologize for the years of jokes, or the times he didn't listen. But I didn't need that now, not anymore, because I saw it. In the way, he didn't rush to fill the moment. In the way he stayed close even when words failed him. That was enough. His silence, for once, wasn't avoidance. It was respect. It was recognition, shaped in a language he had just started to learn. I smiled, barely. Not because I needed validation, but because I finally understood something. I didn't need loud praise or big gestures. I just needed the truth. And this moment, quiet and clumsy and real, gave me more than any speech ever could. The air outside the operations room always smells the same. Steel, fuel, something sharp you can't quite name. I stand there most mornings before the mission teams roll out, reviewing the final overlays, cross-checking the contingencies. My job isn't to command or lead a squad, it's to make sure they have every possible route, in and out. Every scenario accounted for. Every decision is mapped before they even put on their gear. They don't ask a lot of questions anymore. They trust the system now. More importantly, they trust that I built it. There's a rhythm to it all. The night before a major op, I stay late. Sometimes, until the lights in the hallway click off. I tape printouts to the wall. I check weather patterns, satellite images, traffic data, and terrain heat maps, one by one. And then, just before they leave, it happens. 2 knocks. Soft. Deliberate. On the metal frame, outside the ops door. No names. No salutes. Just a pause. Then boots. Walking in. It started as something unspoken. A habit. A signal. But over time, it became what it is now. A message. We're using your plan. We trust it. We trust you. I never asked for that. Never told anyone to do it. But every time I hear those knocks, I feel it in my chest. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Something that says, you did it right. Not because it's perfect, but because it holds. Because they come home. Most of the time, I don't get to see the mission play out. I stay behind with the screens, tracking movement, waiting for pings, watching for gaps. I write notes even then. Mark. Where someone hesitated. Where we lost time. I do it all again the next day. Sharper, cleaner, better. There's no award for this. No ceremony. Sometimes, no thank you. But when the team rolls back in and every name is accounted for, that's enough. That's everything. I walk through those halls with my head up now, not because people finally see me, but because I no longer need them to. Leadership doesn't always come with a title. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence before the chaos, a steady presence, a binder full of details no one else thought to notice. And sometimes, it's a soft knock on a steel frame, just before dawn, that says more than a medal ever could. I used to think I had to prove myself. To be louder, sharper, more visible. But I know better now. I don't need applause. I need precision. I need the weight of knowing that when the worst could happen, it didn't. Because I caught it in time. That's where I lead. Behind the maps. Inside the margins. Not in front of the formation, but at the foundation of it. And in that place, I've built something stronger than noise. I've built trust.